Welcome to the Snapt Application Security Across Hybrid Cloud Deployments and Environments webinar. We've got Simon Michelson, who's the Head of Solution Architecture at Snapt with us today. I'm Gabby and I run channel marketing. And we're going to look at application security as a general principle, the importance across hybrid deployments and environments, as well as how to intelligently reduce security risk, advanced protection for your web, your application, as well as security, compliance, and key criteria. So building within this webinar will be the context, the importance of this for various customers, institutions, and industries. And Simon will take everyone through a brief overview of Snapt Web Application Firewall and the implications and importance it has in securing hybrid environments. So Simon, over to you.
Okay, and thank you, Gabby. And just making sure my voice is coming out loud and clear before we go ahead and begin.
You're absolutely perfect from my side.
Great, thank you so much. So thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone that's joining us today. In today's session, what we'll be doing, we'll be covering really focusing on application security and the challenges associated with running a distributed environment. In many cases today, environments can extend across multiple different data centers, multiple different cloud providers, and even different platforms. We can see a mixture between hypervisors and containers or cloud instances. And as IT and security professionals today, we live in a very dynamic and rapidly changing environment where we on one hand, we want to deliver what we call a state-of-the-art workplace, right, to our users, to the business, infrastructure that's going to be able to support our mission, but at the same time, of course, not to compromise on application security. And the pace things are running in today is presenting challenges for us as security professionals to always stay ahead of the curve. So before we jump in and talk about application security, let's talk about at a high level, what are those key shifts in the market that are really causing, they're pretty exciting, but also causing some of those challenges that we're facing. One is, of course, the cloud and the adoption of cloud services. Now, that has been starting off back in 2008 all the way to today, 12 years later. And we see more and more companies over time adopting cloud and cloud services to the point that even 85% of companies, according to a research done by All Cloud, expect that most of their workloads are going to be running in the cloud by 2020. We also believe that the numbers are much higher than that because of the virus and the pandemic and how it accelerated that cloud adoption. But let alone, that's a very impressive number in terms of adopting cloud. But realizing that this is a transition for many companies and coming from data centers, running their own server rooms, and this is going to be a gradual transition. Effectively, workloads are going to be ported to cloud services gradually, or to some extent, both the on-premise data center and the cloud provider are going to be used in concert to be able to deliver an application. So this is one aspect that's really driving some of the challenges for us, because we don't have a static environment anymore. We have a very dynamic environment, and it's constantly shifting, and there are different controls provided by different cloud providers. But another interesting fact is that we're in what we call a multi-cloud world. An interesting data point is that most companies leverage more than 2 cloud providers. Now, that could be, of course, for high availability and redundancy aspects of being able to run redundant workloads across different cloud providers, but it could also be the fact that there are certain services and features provided by one cloud provider that are simply easier to use, easier to manage over others. So what we also see that happened during this pandemic is that the cloud spending rose by 37% to about $29 billion on the first quarter of 2020. Now, most likely this trend will likely persist, and this mixture between providing a workplace, a virtual workplace for a user, is really becoming the sense of urgency of why we need cloud for deliver scalable, secure, and reliable infrastructure, and at the same time, of course, do it in a very economical fashion, to be able to save costs and do that off premise and really scale as on demand. So. But it's really interesting to see that companies are really leveraging multiple clouds as far as their strategy, and that further complicates things, right? Because we are now leveraging the most leading ones, by the way, are AWS, Azure, Google, and IBM, predominantly. And despite the economic downturn in the wake of the pandemic, we see that increase in spending in cloud. Even companies doubling down that is really the future, as to delivering infrastructure and a workplace to an end user. Now, another key aspect is if we take a look at the different architectures that we have to our disposal as opposed to 5 or 6 years ago. We see more and more conversations about containers and containerized applications. Many of the startup companies who are building products, vendors, are architecting their software to leverage containers. Why? Because it presents, in many cases, a lot of opportunity to deploy more lightweight services, higher performance, and in many cases, of course, save cost, because we no longer need to run a very large resource-hungry application. We can scale each and every component as we need to. But at the same time, although that's becoming the default choice for most enterprise companies, as reported by Gartner, and it's going to become even more and more prominent over the years, we do see a little bit of slowness in companies adopting, or companies that having to transition from legacy servers and virtual appliances into containers. One is, of course, because of lack of expertise, lack of knowledge, lack of skill in that particular technology that companies are still working on acquiring. But in many cases, the choice is also so vast. There's so many different types of container runtime and management platforms that we have to pick, and just navigating between that very crowded environment could be sometimes confusing. But also realizing that what containers present to us is a security challenge in a way, because a lot of the strategies we took as IT professionals 10 years ago to secure a virtual appliance running a web server are completely shifting, because we have to, moving from one, for example, virtual appliance to running maybe 6 or 7 different containers running different services. We have to think about what is that profile for that particular workload that we're running, how it needs to be protected, and in a way break down or duplicate some of those security configurations we had in place to be able to deliver that same application as we did before. So that distribution of lightweight services creates that challenge in terms of securing that entire stack in the new modern way of delivering infrastructure. And then last but not least, we have to think about how the virus had an impact into the way that we do business as users or companies. Needless to say, we can all experience this from our personal lives, with an increase in consumption of things like streaming services, watching a lot more Netflix, a lot more Hulu, and those types of streaming services. Just as a data point here in America, people are spending more time working remotely, and as a result, companies like those streaming services report about 50% increase in the amount of films and shows that are being consumed by users, comparing to before March, before we entered lockdown. But of course, that not only impacts streaming services, but when we think of commerce, when we think of online purchasing of product, where people cannot go into retail stores as much as they used to in the past, a lot of the consumption is being done online through those various types of shopping websites. And of course, our entire social experience or healthcare. We see a lot more companies adopting telehealth, mental health that's done over the phone, medical health, seeing doctors over the phone, over FaceTime, for instance, or even moving our entire social lives into a social media platform. That's how we interact today, sometimes with family, with friends, people in our household. And we can also see a lot of people that are channeling their inner creative to develop a lot of videos for YouTube and TikTok and those types of apps. So overall, we spend a lot more time online than we did before. And as a result of this transition caused by the global pandemic. Now, that's a very interesting data point. If we examine for one aspect is the shift in the market and the adoption of cloud, and then what happens from a security standpoint, we see an increase across the board in cybercrime. According to CNBC, we have about over 250% increase comparing to the third quarter of last year in cybercrime. That's costing companies billions. Some attacks are, by the way, are geared towards what's called exfiltrating information. So that could be your security questions, your credit card numbers, any personal identifiable information. And some other attacks are more geared towards just destruction or causing a disruption at a certain service, or even trying to blackmail a company for paying a ransom, otherwise bringing down their networks. So some examples that we know of course, are ransomware, phishing attacks. A lot of companies believe that these attacks have occurred back in March and April, really started rising because of the transition into working from home as a result of the global lockdown. And what hackers are doing today, they're really using the confusion around the pandemic to the rapidly shifting work online habits that we've adopted to these create what's called ideal conditions for cyber criminals to really exploit all the vulnerabilities. And as IT professionals today, and starting March, we've been working on transitioning a lot of workloads to become external facing. And as a result of that, we become more vulnerable. We inevitably increase what's called our attack surface, and people can exploit those into trying to cause, again, disruption or simply exfiltrate information that's really sensitive. Now, the following visual presents some of the breaches back from 2018 all the way to today, and the contrast of the circles represent the sensitivity of the information that was those hackers were able to obtain. And in terms of the circles, their size, of course, represents the amount of records that were obtained. So, for instance, if you take a look at Microsoft, at about 250 million, as opposed to Facebook with 420 million. And the interesting fact about these is that when you classify all the different types of reasons for that particular hack, typically you see four categories. The first one is simply a hacker was able to find a way to access that application and be able to simply hack the application itself and its vulnerabilities. Other two categories are what's called an inside job, an evil employee, somebody who has privileged access to an account, and through that, of course, obtaining information. A third one is a lost device. Many cases, devices that are lost, whether these are phones, laptops, anything that might have an authenticated session into a company's business application, which can then be used to enter and obtain sensitive info. And the last one is, of course, poor security, and that's the interesting fact. And if we take a look at the ones that are if we take a look at the blue circles in this diagram, these are the ones that reported that the breaches were a result of a poor security for either one or the entire application, one component or the entire application. And the interesting fact is that in more than 50% of the times, the result of a breach is simply a wrong configuration for a component, or of course a component that's securing responsible for securing access to that sensitive component. So that's 56% of the time, and the remaining 40% is just hacks, hackers that are smart enough to be able to infiltrate systems. And of course, the last 1% is those inside job or lost devices. So that really shows that security needs to be at our forefront, and as a result of quickly shifting to externalizing a lot of those applications we used to run internally, are a cause for that vulnerabilities being exposed. Because when we're trying to do things very fast to move applications from internal to external, we might not have or be able to go through all the processes we need to in order to make sure that we have all of the security controls in place. So that's really interesting to see from a data standpoint. And that really confirms what we're seeing happening in the market, working with security professionals, as to where spending is going to be focused in the next 2 years. So from survey done by McKinsey and Company, you see that the 4 main categories in terms of cybersecurity priorities and spending priorities for organizations is going to be focused on 4 key areas. The first one being what we call perimeter security, and that's securing our network. So we're expected to see an increased spend in making sure that we have the controls to really make sure that that online surge we're seeing in the market, again, in social media and e-commerce and healthcare, financial activity, to make sure that those applications have the relevant protection in front of them, and we reduce our attack surface or our exposure and mitigate vulnerabilities as fast as possible. The second piece is what we call the remote access or remote workplace. That is here to stay. Talking to many companies, even when we're allowed to go back into the office, companies are going to adopt a work scenario where users are still welcome to work from home 2 to 3 days a week. And that means that IT is now responsible to deliver that entire workplace, starting from providing those business applications to be accessed externally, moving VoIP, moving file sharing to be accessed remotely, as opposed to in the office, to bridge that user experience gap as a result of people working remote. But of course, also we see an increase in VDI projects and delivering a remote desktop to the data center, to the cloud, where business users can really work and access their applications and their data. And of course, security is a part of each of those initiatives. As we deliver more and more infrastructure to our remote users and devices, we need to make sure that we do that in a very secure way that doesn't cause any danger to our organization. Also thinking about compliance, many of those companies in the healthcare and financial, insurance, heavily regulated, and have to comply with PCI, with HIPAA, and in many cases, the compliance aspect is not the challenging part. Is the fact that the infrastructure could be so diverse and exist in so many locations that it's really hard to determine whether a certain configuration is consistent across multiple different cloud providers or between an on-premise or a cloud data center. The third category is around identity access controls or gaining visibility also to our entire security posture. Access controls, of course, a two-factor authentication. We see more of those types of products being rolled out to our users to obtain a very secure fashion of accessing resources. But we're looking also for information management tools or advanced security analytics. What this will allow us to do is to be able to reconcile a comprehensive view of a certain application or a certain workload when it's running in a very distributed environment. A great example that I always give is, imagine that you have a website that has instances of it running globally in 3 continents. You can have some of those instances running in a container on Kubernetes in Azure Cloud. You can have some of those running as EC2 instances in Amazon, or you can have them run as traditional servers, bare metal servers in your data center. And the complexity in that situation is, how do I coherently obtain all of those metrics that are important to me, not only from a security perspective, to see if there's maybe activity or attacks being currently happening in Asia as opposed to Europe, and be able to gain those takeaways and, of course, implement those preemptive controls to enforce future attacks from happening. But also, when you think about key performance indicators and how well our application is performing, how can I get a comprehensive view that is application-wide and not specific to a certain location, that I can say my app not only works well in the United States, but it's operating well globally in Europe and in Asia Pac as well. So that is becoming a lot, really at the forefront, is how do we consolidate a lot of those key performance indicators and security metrics into one place where IT and security professionals can really take action. But then, of course, the fourth one, and that's really relevant to where we are today. When we think about 2020, and a lot of those IT and security budgets were defined back at the beginning of the year before we entered lockdown. And we've made assumptions. We forecasted how this year is going to look like based on different reality, essentially. And if we think about the challenges we're facing as IT, is how do we ensure consistency, first and foremost, of application configuration across multiple endpoints, sites, users, edge devices. This is one aspect of compliance and ensuring that globally our configuration is consistent. But second is, how are we able to do more with less, right? How do we do more with a limited budget? So the pandemic has created a significant manpower problem to be able to deliver a very reliable and secure infrastructure to our users, simply because we've made assumptions on how this year is going to look like at the beginning of the year. So automation is really the way to help address that. When we look at the tools like Ansible, like Terraform, to be able to define a configuration and enforce it globally, these are becoming widely adopted by a lot of IT professionals. And of course, this is really the way to go, especially as we're looking to transition quickly. So how can we do that reliably? We need to look at tools that are going to be helpful for us to accomplish that task, as opposed to relying on manual operation done by users that are more error prone. So if we really boil it down and really think about the transition, for one, in terms of moving to hybrid cloud deployments, adopting hybrid cloud, and then the increase in cybercrime and activity, really the things we're looking to solve are, first, is a visibility and control problem, where if you can't see your environment or your entire environment, how can you control and secure it? This is really the question. So in a multi-cloud strategy, where we're struggling between learning different infrastructures, learning different semantics, different configuration portals, we're looking for a way to be able to distribute that centrally, and at the same time gain visibility across the board and how well we're performing. Second is, from a compliance and governance standpoint, those highly regulated industries that are very nervous about cloud computing in general. For years, they outright banned or leveraged cloud only for non-critical, non-sensitive tasks. but we see them adopting more and more of those cloud services. But one of the biggest challenges is not only coming from any one regulation, whether it's PCI or HIPAA, but again, it's really the fact that many companies are still manually checking to see if they're compliant with a certain code. And meeting custom regulatory requirements or security baselines is becoming increasingly difficult when it's done manually. And sometimes you have to revert to that approach when you're dealing with such a diverse environment. Third is, of course, when we look at our data security, how do we secure our APIs, our web traffic? Web traffic accounts for almost 70 to 80% of the internet traffic today. And with the increase in online activity, that might be even more. So effectively ensuring that from a encryption at rest in motion, and be able to define those security profiles for each and every application and have them take place instantly is another crucial part. But then the biggest thing, and that's really the biggest point for the environment, the reality that we live in today, we live in a very dynamic world, and infrastructure is constantly changing. New platforms are constantly being introduced, and vendors develop more and more applications that we want to consume. So ensuring security is of course not a task that we can accomplish only today or tomorrow. It has to be continuous. We have to look for tools and rely on tools that are going to be able to add that security to part of the process. So we're working today a lot with DevOps teams that incorporate those security checks to the design, building, and deployment part of shipping and new software applications to their users. But the second piece is, of course, is partnering with the right vendors. Vendors that, of course, employ secure programming practices, but also provide you visibility to the types of artifacts they're using as part of building their software. So that visibility, that continuous relationship with vendors and understanding their security practices is paramount to be able to not only ensure that you're secure today, but then as new iterations, new versions come out, that you rest assured that you're in good hands as well. So if we take a look at really some of the ways that can be technically help address these types of challenges that we're seeing. One of the common ways that was used in the past as well to solve some of those control, visibility, and of course continuous security problems can be done by separating the control from the data. And that means that we have a centralized broker, a centralized dashboard that provides us with all the control to all those remote endpoints that we need to deploy and manage. So when we think of the environment we're in today, where an application could reside in hundreds of different types of locations and in many little containers or VMs, we want to be able to efficiently distribute configuration, security config to all those endpoints. And specifically, since the majority of the workload is web-based and leveraging protocols such as HTTP or HTTPS, we leverage web application firewalls to provide that extra layer of security to our backends. And imagine that you had to do that, of course, for for Amazon instances, for Azure, for Google Cloud, and also for on-premise data centers. This could be a very labor-intensive work, and at any point in time, you might be risking a situation where there was one human error or one error that results in a different configuration between those different infrastructures. And as a result, when it comes to predictability of how well an environment should operate, you have no baseline, because if a certain region is not operating as fast as another, this might point out some inconsistencies in your configuration. So leveraging a control plane can really help us address that continuous configuration management and really configure things once and apply them wherever they need to apply. Now, this could be on-prem today, this could be in a cloud tomorrow, or it could be everywhere. And so a platform that can really accommodate that flexibility in terms of scale or delivering infrastructure to multiple locations is a terrific solution to be able to address that control issue. The second piece is, of course, visibility. So aggregating a view of all the security threats that we have for the entire application. One of the common examples that I like to give is a situation where you have an increase in attacks happening here in North America, for instance, and you want to be able to quickly determine that there's certain activity happening in a location, and then maybe drive action or apply those security adjustments to other areas where they might be target for future attacks. That helps a lot with denial of service, with bot protection, bots that are trying to scan your websites. So getting that centralized visibility is something that could be key. Imagine you have tens or even hundreds of web application firewalls, each blocking a certain request, and how powerful it can be for you to be able to access a single dashboard that you can reconcile and see all those and really draw what's the common denominator between all those attempts. And then third is when we talk about more future and modern threat intelligence. When we combine machine learning and artificial intelligence, really the power of a control and data plane is by consolidating, gaining visibility to all those blocks and metrics that we've collected from the endpoints into one system. We can then automatically anticipate a certain behavior from a hacker or an attacker. So if we identify that there is any vulnerability or people are looking to leverage or exploit a certain vulnerability, we can preemptively identify that and then take action to protect your applications in the rest of the locations that you have them deployed. Now, this is really key, and especially when you work with companies in this day and age that are looking for something a little bit beyond a standalone web application firewall. And from conversations talking to financial institutions, healthcare, education, and retail, they're looking to not only simplify and ensure the consistency across for the configuration, but really getting a view or getting more for all that data that they're collecting, and to really help improve their security posture. So really the value is in the data. And if we simply keep it and we don't make use of it, then it goes to waste. So a global threat intelligence strategy is a terrific way of really improving the level of security that we're able to deliver. So with that, I'll go ahead and I'll introduce Snapt and talk a little bit about who we are, and maybe walk through a little demo of our web application firewall capability. So at Snapt, we ensure that your business applications are always on, fast, and free from threats. What we feature is a centrally managed ADC platform, essentially an ADC as a service platform that we help IT and DevOps teams to deploy, manage, and elastically scale all aspects of load balancing, web acceleration, and application firewalling across any app service running either on-prem, in the cloud, or in a container platform. And on average, what we're seeing is that clients are really happy with this type of approach. When you think of traditional ADCs, they tend to be very monolithic, resource hungry, and in many cases might not be a good fit or even become a burden for future and modern applications. We can see the market shifting from talking about servers to talking about services that are more lightweight, that can run anywhere. And we believe that ADCs should follow suit and be able to provide that independence in terms of infrastructure, be very lightweight, and then, of course, scale as your application scales. as you need more resources to meet users' demands, or when you need to save on costs and scaling down your infrastructure. We're able to deliver that automatically through a centralized ADC platform. We work with some Fortune 100 companies, as you can see, as well as companies in the with the federal government. So that, of course, can attest to the level of security and reliability that we have in our philosophy as part of delivering products and services to our customers. Of course, we deliver this globally. We have partnerships with all the major cloud providers, and we're able to run on any platform, as you'll see as we go through this presentation. On average, from working with customers, we get reports that we help them save significantly in their ADC infrastructure costs by leveraging this lightweight architecture. So if we take a look at a high level at our platform and really presenting Snapt Nova, our fully managed ADC platform that consists of what we call a cloud controller, that is the centralized hub or broker that provides you with a centralized configuration management console for applying updates and changes to your load balancing, web acceleration, WAF, and of course your GSLB. And then on the data plane, we have lightweight worker ADCs. The worker ADC can run again on any container, cloud, or on-premise environment, and it's processing data as it comes from your clients and then directly to your backend servers. The beauty of this architecture is not only that the worker ADCs can sit at the front end, providing access to your cloud or to your data centers, but they can also help load balance distributed applications between a web server and a database, for instance. So typically, you will see Snapt Nova deployed not only in a north-south traffic control type of fashion, but also leverage an east-west type of architectures where you have traffic running in within the quarters of your data center. And then Snapt Nova employs that control and data plane separation that we've discussed previously. That can help, of course, address the both the configuration and, of course, the visibility aspect of obtaining all those metrics and key performance indicators into one console. Okay. From a technical standpoint, the platform is feature-rich. We have lots of integrations with various different types of monitoring, configuration management tools, and of course, you can see that we can run on any kind of platform. What's really unique about Nova is we define ADC as a configuration template, and an ADC is simply a set of instructions, and it can run on any node. We have an instant protocol that updates all of your ADCs that you have deployed. So for instance, if we take a WAF deployment that has 100 instances and we want to create a whitelist rule, we're able to apply that and of course provide you with feedback instantly to hundreds of endpoints in matters of seconds. And then of course, from an auto-scaling perspective, we can automatically scale the deployment and self-deploy those ADCs for you to meet user demand and, of course, to conserve costs as your utilization becomes below a certain threshold. Okay. Good. So with that, I'll transition, and with the time we have left, I'm going to take you through a short demo of the web application firewall capability delivered as part of the Snapt Nova platform, and really walk through some of this basic, of course, monitoring and data analytics capabilities that we offer as part of this solution. Okay. Good. So with that, I will transition to my screen over here, and Gabby, just making sure that the screen came up correctly.
Yep, everything looks good.
Good. Thank you so much. So here we are, and this is the Nova Cloud Controller. So this is the single pane of glass management we have as an organization to deploy, manage, and configure all of our remote ADCs. And here I'm in the main dashboard where I can get a high-level view of the nodes I have deployed, and of course some various different types of metrics around the performance of those nodes. Here we are, live broadcasting from New York. You can see that our node is deployed here in New York City, and we have a little website. It's called Hello World. It's running WordPress, and let's go ahead and take a look at it. So I'm going to go ahead and open a tab and type in Hello World, and here we are. So this is our little website that's comprised of a MySQL backend and, of course, 2 front-end WordPress web servers. So this could represent an application that's distributed. We're using the ADC not only to load balance traffic to those 2 web servers, but we also have the web application firewall turned on. So just to show that as an example, I'm going to go ahead and try to perform an SQL injection, which is one of the most common 10 threats in the application security. And I'm going to go ahead and type in test equals and then delete everything from the users table. This will, for example, simulate an attack that's going to try and cause disruption on our website. And by trying to do so, you will see that we've identified, of course, that this was an SQL injection and it was blocked as expected. Now, at this point, what we can go ahead and do is let's have a look and see how this looks like on the Nova dashboard. And again, with this real-time replication of events between the worker, ADCs, and the cloud controller, we're able to quickly, instantly identify that a certain attack was attempted on one of our websites. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is click on ADCs. We can, of course, see all the different, the count of the total number of requests, the request rate, and of course, the health of our back-end web servers. But what I'll go ahead and do is simply click on our website and look at our WAF blocks. So what we expect to see is an SQL injection. And I'm going to go ahead and find it. And there it is. Here's an SQL injection detected trying to delete everything from the users table, and this was identified as a block. So it only took a few seconds for us to not only block it, but then let the cloud controller know that this request was blocked. Now, this is a real-time log that we offer that presents this type of information. But of course, if we want to take a look at WAF blocks, this shows a more continuous log that's kept for a longer data retention on the Nova controller that will present us with the same view. And we can, of course, take a look at the IP addresses that this attack was done on. We can see what node was targeted. If we have multiple WAFs deployed and this was identified in one over the other, of course, they're identified by names or unique identifiers. And if I'm looking to, of course, whitelist any rule, what I can go ahead and do is simply copy this, and I can go to WAF and WAF rules, and I can go ahead and paste. So this will be a way to whitelist this SQL injection if it is a legitimate request. So what I can go ahead and do is click Save. And by doing so, Nova will automatically update all the web application firewalls that I have deployed and let them know about this configuration change. And this is extremely powerful, especially when you're thinking of a distributed environment that consists of tens or maybe hundreds of web application firewalls. So with this minimal change, I can notify all those 100 instances about this new update. And what I can go ahead, of course, and do is I can go ahead and refresh the page, and this same SQL injection that was identified previously is now identified as a legitimate request, and it's no longer blocked, and I'm presented with a website. To be able to of course, remove any type of whitelist rules, I can simply click on this little X button and click Save again. And again, Nova will update my web application firewall. And if I'm going to go ahead and refresh a couple of times until the configuration is updated, and there you have it. This request was identified as malicious again. Okay. Now, if we take a look at our Threat Center, the Threat Center is a terrific way of really understanding where the risk is. Again, an application could be will be comprised of maybe multiple instances. So therefore, we provide, of course, a map view where we can show you all the locations where you have your web application firewalls deployed and how well they're performing. Here you can see an example of this one instance that I have deployed. You can see the traffic that's coming in and out. What is the rate of errors that we're receiving? So this can also help you understand quantitatively if there are more attempts being done in one location versus the other. Of course, I can click on this little icon and look at per IP rates, and we can see that I ran a lot of attempts to try to access this website, and so I was identified as a scanner, as that is going to be blocked. So this is really efficient especially when you're thinking about bot protection, and bots are really a challenging aspect today because some bots are positive, some are extremely negative. So some can have really positive value on your website, others can be. It's really important to draw that distinction. So we do quite well as far as identifying the bad actors versus the good actors. And of course, if we take a look at generally from an ADC standpoint, you can see that we provide a lot of charge and visualizations. So if we take a look at, for example, at the telemetry information, we can get real-time view of how well our application is performing. So for instance, in many cases, we work with clients that certain web servers are not replying in the same response time as others. So this could point out to some, again, wrong configuration or poor infrastructure as the back end, or some application-related latency. So we're able to report that and tell you exactly which of the URLs are performing better comparing to others, and of course, show you real-time information about your response times, request rates, and of course, how many blocks. And the reason we're seeing so many blocks here is because I'm running a script in the background that every 10 seconds is doing a remote code execution or a SQL injection attempt on this little Hello World website that we're seeing here. So that's why the numbers here are pretty significant, about 60. So with that, what I will do is also show some of these aspects that we can, of course, tune the configuration for specific workloads. If you have certain web applications that have certain characteristics or semantics, we have a way of detecting that and of course, whitelisting certain requests comparing to others. We can adjust the paranoia levels of your web application firewall if you're looking for more protection versus user experience. We can adjust the levels appropriately. And of course, we provide an IP reputation and protection against denial of service. So we can enable those, of course, and protect against those types of attacks. And then lastly, from a configuration standpoint, enabling the WAF is simply activating a radio box. So that is all I had to do to enable the Nova web application firewall. And as you can see, by default, we can turn on protection against bots, scanners, and we can also turn on a learning mode where we identify the characteristics of your application and and drive conclusions on how the WAF should be configured appropriately to be able to adjust for your needs. Good. With that, I will go ahead and transition back to our presentation and summarize. So really what we've covered today was to look at a little bit the shift in terms of adoption of cloud and hybrid cloud in the market today. This is exacerbated, of course, by COVID-19. And as IT and security professionals were rapidly looking to move infrastructure and deploy it in the cloud so we can deliver it to our users and to the business. But needless to say that that quick transition represents, of course, two things. One is us not doing the proper work or have enough time to do the proper work to ensure that our applications are secure. But also, it's increasing our attack surface because inevitably, as we open applications to be accessible externally from the internet, more people can try to abuse it and obtain access to it. So we've covered, of course, the shift to hybrid cloud, and of course the main focuses in terms of cybersecurity spending around perimeter security, identity access control, analytics, automation, and of course remote access. And of course we've also covered the web application firewall capabilities delivered as part of the Snapt platform and how crucial and important it is to employ a control and data plane architecture that can help us publish configuration centrally and of course gain a lot of visibility to the overall security posture and performance of our applications globally. So with that, Gabby, I'll hand it over back to you, and thank you everyone for, of course, joining today's meeting.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Simon. And everyone, as you can see, if we are engaging, it would be wonderful to chat. If we haven't engaged yet, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Simon, and would love to potentially demo Snapt, Nova, as well as our WAF, and just see how we can help with your hybrid infrastructure. But thank you everyone for your time. I hope you have a great morning, afternoon, and evening, and looking forward to speaking with everyone soon. Thanks so much.